The Xiaomi 12 Pro is now available in global markets after coming first to China earlier this year, but how does it stack up against last year's and the current flagship Mi 11 Ultra? Well, let's find out. Thanks for watching 9to5 Google here on YouTube. Remember to thumbs up, hit subscribe and then tap the bell icon to be among the first to watch our upcoming videos. The usage of the brand new Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 processor definitely favours the Xiaomi 12 Pro, at least from a pure internal hardware perspective, but it's actually a much closer battle here than you might have initially thought. Of course, the newer model has an LTPO AMOLED display that is being utilised for the first time in a Xiaomi flagship device. Elsewhere though, as we mentioned, things are a little bit more comparable. Both of these phones do include a 120Hz refresh rate with a curved display as well, and this is great for UI smoothness and elevates every little interaction that you have with these phones to another level compared to other devices out there. The LTPO panel and the smaller size though might be of interest to people out there, as the 12 Pro is a slightly smaller handset as a result. Of course, LTPO displays can dynamically drop the refresh rate on specific on-screen content to help reduce power draw, although it is harder to argue if this works massively. This also might help as well, given that the battery size is almost 10% smaller on this newer model. Toughened Gorilla Glass Victus is also used across this duo, and while this is said to be 2 times tougher than Gorilla Glass 6, a curved screen is still going to be prone to damage. I will say though, it is hard to tell these displays apart when they're side by side. At least on paper, the Xiaomi 12 Pro does edge the Mi 11 Ultra, but that said, the Mi 11 Ultra is still a good phone. I will say it is much heavier and chunkier when in the hand, and the 12 Pro feels positively slender, at least by comparison, so if you want a smaller handset, maybe the 12 Pro is one to look at. Of course, as we mentioned, if you're just looking at the processor, the newer model will be a far better choice, courtesy of that Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 chip. However, the Qualcomm Snapdragon 888 found in the Mi 11 Ultra is not actually too far behind, and because both devices use 8 or 12GB of RAM and do pack in UFS 3.1 storage, I've got to say that the performance levels, at least in most cases, are really comparable here. There is going to be a definite gaming advantage or benefit to the newer chip, but it is worth noting that the Mi 11 Ultra benefits from increased storage options available. The base storage option on the 12 Pro starts at 128GB versus 256GB on last year's Ultra model. That said, there is no storage expansion unfortunately, so it is important to pick your device wisely. The audio experience is being tuned by Harman Kardon. It just ensures that watching video content on either the Xiaomi 12 Pro or even the Mi 11 Ultra is genuinely an extremely enjoyable experience in tandem with such good AMOLED displays. So in terms of software, MIUI is still one of the most feature-rich third-party Android skins available, and thanks to a recent update, it technically comes in the same flavour on the Xiaomi 12 Pro and the Mi 11 Ultra, and that is MIUI 13. That said, this relies heavily upon the rollout of Android 12 to the Mi 11 Ultra, of which we're actually still waiting for our test device here. It's also worth noting as well that there are a few little differences courtesy of hardware changes. For all intents and purposes, Android 12 here is not quite the same as how Google envisages it on its own version for Pixel smartphones. There are plenty of extra tweaks to the visual elements that you will see on screen, and there are also a few areas where MIUI 13 still feels like an homage to iOS. That said, there is a true wealth of added controls and functions that many of the lighter skins from other OEMs out there simply do not offer. That said, the experience, at least from a core MIUI 13 perspective, is practically identical on both of these devices. Biometrics on both handsets are provided by optical in-display fingerprint scanners, and they're both fast and accurate with subtle UI tweaks to animations that you can apply here too if you really want to. There's also a neat but limited secondary screen that kind of differentiates the Xiaomi Mi 11 Ultra from the 12 Pro, and this does add a little bit of extra intrigue to last year's flagship. It can be useful for doing things like checking notifications, or even as a more useful framing tool for when wanting to take selfies with the rear camera setup. And while this additional screen is by no means a reason to buy the Mi 11 Ultra over the 12 Pro, it does definitely help differentiate the design because there is a huge whopping great camera module at the back to incorporate this extra screen. Xiaomi also now says that it offers 3 years of OS upgrades and 4 years of regular security patches for its flagship smartphone lines after making that change in late 2021. That said, both handsets only get security updates on a 90-day schedule, which falls far short of the likes of Samsung, which offers monthly patches and full updates in a fairly timely manner. Although the Chinese OEM made this added support commitment, it does seem that the Mi 11 Ultra is set to cease getting software support from April 2024, which doesn't really fall within the window that they've specified, while the Xiaomi 12 Pro should continue to be supported until April 2026 if this commitment is adhered to. It's obviously hard to deny that Xiaomi has helped lead the industry in recent years with regard to device charging speeds. It also helps that the firm is not afraid to throw in what we'd consider huge internal batteries into their phones. With a power-hungry 120Hz display on both devices, you will want to rely on your smartphone to last at least a day, and the 5000 mAh and 4600 mAh internal cells are more than enough on both of these phones for heavy days, even with the full resolution and refresh rates enabled. If you do manage to tax that battery though, you don't need to worry about the charging speeds on either device. While the Xiaomi 12 Pro comes with insanely fast 120 watt wired charging, the Mi 11 Ultra also includes pretty rapid 67 watt wired and wireless charging, while both of these handsets do include the ability to reverse wireless charge at 10 watt speeds. The wireless charging speeds are a little bit slower on the 2022 model, but 50 watt wireless charging is still a great option to have at your fingertips. Despite the Mi 11 Ultra having a slight advantage in the internal cell size, the lifespan of both of these devices is very close, especially when display resolutions are set down to Full HD Plus resolution. With the full fat QHD Plus enabled and at 120Hz, the longevity is still within pretty close limits here too. That said, it is important to note that this is going to be anecdotal, given that daily usage from person to person is going to vary quite drastically. Xiaomi has really been pushing the idea that ultra high resolutions are what we're all craving on our smartphones and slapping in as many lenses as humanly possible. The Xiaomi Mi 11 Ultra easily beat out the 11T Pro from last year in terms of sheer variety and focal length, but with the 12 Pro, it's a little bit more nuanced. The Xiaomi 12 Pro is actually the first smartphone to feature the Sony IMX707 1/128 inch sensor, and therefore drops the popular Samsung ISOCELL main sensor for the main lens on offer here. It also means that we won't see any 108 megapixel sensors, which have been used on the Xiaomi 11T Pro and the Mi 11 series throughout 2021. The huge new Sony sensor is really great for light gathering, added image depth, and low light performance on the Xiaomi 12 Pro, but the sheer flexibility of the Mi 11 Ultra camera setup means it's impressive in its own right, and the sensor selection is also contending very well with the latest and greatest. While I'll say it's not perfect, the ability to get excellent results up to 30 times zoom, as well as the fun that comes with 120 times zoom, means it's hard to be disappointed by the Mi 11 Ultra's camera setup, even though there are better ones out there, at least today. Digital zoom on the Xiaomi 12 Pro is still mighty impressive thanks to that bigger sensor, but it does pale in comparison to the dedicated zoom setup of the 2021 flagship. When you do start to look beyond the main sensor though, things get a little bit more tricky, and it does become harder to really differentiate the two devices. The Xiaomi 12 Pro does have a vastly superior selfie camera though, but the neat mini rear display on the Mi 11 Ultra is great for selfie taking, especially as you can use the main sensor on the Mi 11 Ultra. That said, no matter which setup you do prefer, these are going to be two of the best camera selections on Android, even at this stage of 2022. It's also worth noting the same camera app functions and features are present across both devices, minus some of the ultra zoom functions. This means that you can access things like improved night modes, dual video recording, long exposure, and extra movie effects, as well as full promo controls if you don't want to get down to the nitty and gritty. So when you consider that both devices are separated by chipset, the Xiaomi 12 Pro and the Mi 11 Ultra are still two phones that do compare very well, despite being released almost a year apart. And it is still worth noting that the Mi 11 Ultra is technically the top of the line from Xiaomi, despite the fact that it is an older device. Although we will say neither is quite perfect, the Mi 11 Ultra does offer a compelling package for both of those wanting what we'd consider the latest and greatest, while the Xiaomi 12 Pro might prove a better long-term buy thanks to that chipset and extended software support. The suggested retail pricing is very similar for both of these phones, but now that the Mi 11 Ultra is a little older, it is priced at a little bit more of an accessible price point. If you're also happy to pick up a 12-month-old phone, it is going to have its distinct advantages. However, the Xiaomi 12 Pro is priced very well and competitively at $999 for the base model. Disappointingly though, if you are in North American markets, you actually won't get to decide between either of these fairly excellent smartphones. Instead, we think you might want to look at the Pixel 6 Pro or recent Galaxy S22 Plus or even the S22 Ultra for a comparable smartphone experience. In global regions though, the Xiaomi 12 Pro does stand alongside the best in the business and well worth a closer look. Ultimately though, the choice is yours, but with all of that information, hopefully you'll now have a better idea of the core differences to help you make that all-important purchase decision. That said, we also want to know which you think is the better buy, even given the inherent differences. Let us know down in the comment sections below, but until next time, this is Damien with 95 Google saying thanks for watching, and I will speak to you later.